Hi, if you're watching this video from Bender's class in first period, I'm going to assume that you really don't care about what I have to say about this book. But if you're anything like me, you're going to realize that this book is actually uh, great and it has a lot of dry humor and uh, difficult things to understand, which really made me curious as to why it's become a classic. It's so confusing that it's hard to understand and why it would be popular. And at first, I thought that this book, Slaughterhouse-Five, was going to be a really sad book. Some sad book written in 1969. I thought I was really going to hate it. But instead, I realized it was actually a really happy book. A really funny book, described as hilarious, described to be letting you have a laugh during a really sad type of book. And that's all true. And as I got into the book, uh, it's about Kurt Vonnegut, the author himself, who writes the first chapter from his own point of view. He's a writer writing about his time served in Dresden, just to make money, because that's really all he wants. He doesn't have any sentimental value to his stories. It's just to make money. And basically, he had spent time in World War II in Dresden. He was there during the Dresden bombings that lasted several months, but he survived and he got home. And about 15 years later, he writes a book about his time. Uh, Afterwards, the city of Dresden was left in ruins, and it was just completely terrible. He described the fire as having been wiped clean by a blaze that killed all things organic. And I think that was a really good way for him to display his theme of nonsense. As he goes through the book, he's going to be talking about how everything bad is makes no sense to him, and his way of doing that is he avoids using realistic terms, but instead he relates things using metaphors and similes. He goes to his friend's house to get memories, basically recollect his memories from war. This is somebody that he served with. The guy reminds him of another guy who served with him, Billy Pilgrim. Uh, this is the man that the rest of the book takes to describing and telling the story of. A man who is a prisoner of war behind bars and is sent on a train with his other prisoners of war uh, to Slaughterhouse-Five. Slaughterhouse-Five was a slaughterhouse where they killed prisoners and was repurposed to house all of the prisoners during these Dresden bombings to keep them alive and keep them off the streets. After the bombings, when the city was destroyed, he made his way down a ditch with his friends that he had escaped with, and is just walking down, and then he happens to run into the Tralfamadorians, a group of aliens that are described to look like plunger people. And these people give him visions of the past and also the future. They give him these visions of him in the future when he gets back home as an optometrist with a wife and kids, and he really enjoys this. And these experiences that they show him are very similar to the experiences that he had in the war, but instead of shining a bad light on it like he did when he was recollecting his memories, it's actually shining a good light on what they are showing him now. It's his way of escaping in his own mind. And towards the end of the book, we get a lot of these visuals that are basically emphasizing his nonsense theme. Pudui, this bird that is basically giving this nonsense comment to something so nonsense, something that doesn't make sense. The Dresden bombings, they don't make sense. It was a terrible time that led to many deaths, and Kurt Vonnegut wanted to emphasize that it doesn't make sense, and that these bombings and these bad things that happen in our lives, they just don't make sense. And just like the book, it doesn't make sense.